I'm Alexander McCall Smith. I'm the author of the #1 Ladies Detective Agency series of books set here in Botswana. I'm writing the 9th book in the series, and I thought that I would get into one of these canoes and go off into the delta to see if there's anything here which might interest Mara Motswe. Mara Motswe had a detective agency in Africa, at the foot of Kali Hill. These were its assets: a tiny white van, 2 desks, 2 chairs, a telephone, and an old typewriter. Then there was a teapot in which Mara Motswe, the only lady private detective in Botswana, brewed redbush tea, and 3 mugs, 1 for herself, 1 for her secretary, and 1 for the client. What else does a detective agency really need?
These are the opening lines of the first book in the very popular series about Mara Motswe, the Botswana detective whom readers all over the world have taken to their hearts. The man behind the books is the Scottish author Alexander McCall Smith, who returns to Botswana every year in search of new mysteries for his leading lady to solve.
I'm going to start writing that while I'm in Botswana. I've already written in my mind the first page. I can hear the first page. That's what happens. I hear the first page. I hear the books.
He lives in Edinburgh, but was born in southern Rhodesia, today's Zimbabwe. Here in Botswana's tranquil Okavango Delta, he is preparing the 9th book in his series, The Miracle at Speedy Motors. It's important for him to capture the true essence of Botswana, an essence which permeates the books.
I listen to what people say to me, listen to things, and it's amazing if one keeps one's ears open, what you hear. You hear remarkable stories about people. And then also just being here and, I suppose, absorbing the feel of the country. It's a country which has this very powerful effect.
The chief reason for the success of the book series is probably the main character, the shrewd, kind-hearted and traditionally built Mara Motswe.
I think I'm going to bring Mara Motswe up here in the next book, and of course she'll probably go out in one of these canoes. The problem is she's a very, very traditionally built lady, a very large lady, and I'm not sure if she would fit in one of these canoes. Mighty, have you got a very big canoe for this lady who's very, very large? Very wide, she. Good. Thank you, thank you.
Today there's a walking safari on Hammerkop Island in northern Botswana's Okavango Delta. The guides, Mighty and Moses, hand out instructions.
When we come across any one of the big animals, don't panic. I'm sure that their safety is very important. Safety is come first.
I think that every time one goes out into the bush, if one keeps one's eyes and ears open, you can learn new things, and it's always very useful talking to local people who know everything there is to know about the bush.
These trees, the roots, can cure malaria.
Oh, right.
They're called large fever berries. So you can take the roots and then boil it, maybe some couple of minutes, and then you can drink the water can help you from malaria.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. If you have
they can tell you a great deal. So something that seems to be just a rather pretty scene, in fact, is a very rich natural environment. There's a lot happening in the bush. So you've seen a lion, have you?
Yes.
Yes.
It looks like
just this side of the...
Side of this.
When the lion was seen, my immediate reaction was, how close is this lion? In general, it's preferable to have lions a considerable distance away as far as I'm concerned. I thought that lion was rather too close to us, but in fact we were, I gather, perfectly safe. So my immediate reaction was that we should go in the opposite direction. But the lion decided to do that. So we parted company in a very satisfactory, it was a very satisfactory encounter from both points of view. Is that recent, Moses? Is that fresh?
Yeah, it's for this morning.
This morning? He was there this morning?
Yeah, it's for this morning.
Many readers wonder if Ma Ramotswe exists in real life. The idea for the character came to Alexander McCall Smith when he was invited to lunch at Friends in Mochude village. A very energetic woman offered him a chicken, which he chased all over the compound.
She was a traditionally built woman, wearing a red dress. That's all I remember about her. She had a very nice smile, and she was giving a chicken to my hostess of the people I was staying with in Mochude, and we went to collect it, and she chased the chicken around the yard. And I can still see her chasing the chicken around the yard. And that made me think that I would one day write about somebody like that. It just made me curious about it. But it took many years before I did that. Much later on, I sat down and Ma Ramotswe came into existence.
Since the unforgettable chicken chase, the 8 books about the #1 Ladies Detective Agency have become international successes. The books have been translated into 41 languages. 15 million copies have been sold worldwide, including 8 million in the United States.
I don't really know why she's a detective. I hadn't, when I wrote about her at the very beginning, decided that she would be a detective. It actually proved to be a very good choice. Being a detective means she gets about the place, she meets all sorts of people, and it gives an opportunity for humorous situations as well. So it proved to be very, very useful, although of course she isn't the usual sort of detective.
A reader wanting foul play, action and sudden death won't get much joy out of the books. The suspense is in the moral dilemmas that Ma Ramotswe and her colourful assistant Ma Makutsi encounter on their cases.
The fact that she was seeing so many different people and encountering so many different problems, in a way, meant that I could concentrate on developing a sense of place and of the psychology of the place and of a bit of its history.
Ma Ramotswe's love of her home country, Botswana, is a theme common to all the books in the series.
The sense of place in detective fiction is often very strong. It's a central aspect of that, and I think these books have quite a strong sense of place. Botswana is one of the characters. Ma Ramotswe's relationship with her country is an important point in the books. She describes herself as an African patriot, that she is very fond of Africa and proud of Africa, and she's very proud of her country in particular.
Would you say that Ma Ramotswe is atypical for the Botswana woman?
I think that she has many of the characteristics of Botswana women in general. She's got a resilience, she's hardworking, she's got a good sense of humour. And that's a quality that I do notice in people here. And I certainly didn't make her up entirely, because obviously when a writer writes about a fictional character, creates a fictional character, the writer will use experience of people that he or she has had. So I've met people like Ma Ramotswe, or I've met people who have some of her qualities and perhaps not others, and on the basis of that I've produced a single character, Precious Ramotswe.
One of the many strong women who have inspired Alexander McCall Smith for his Ma Ramotswe is Botswana's Minister of Health.
In his writings, I do I'm sure I do come into his mind. In fact, he just recently admitted to saying that he really, when he writes these books, he doesn't have a single character in mind. However, the Minister of Health is his constant reference. He said my vitality, which is nice. When he writes about Mara Motsoe, he thinks of my vitality and all that, and it does spur him on. So I would say I see myself in there. But then so does every Motswana woman, I'm sure.
Alexander McCall Smith, who is an emeritus professor of medical law, today spends all his time writing and meeting his readers.
Reviews, people say he keeps going on about tiny white van. We know that it's tiny and it's white and it's van. So
Alexander McCall Smith, yes. Lovely, refreshing, whimsical, very gentle female characters who I think nothing more than totally appealing. It's lovely to see the sort of good side of human nature coming out in literature rather than the sort of darker, seamier side.
I think they're really great books because I love Africa. It's like my favourite country, and I've always wanted to go there, and so I love learning about it. And I love all the characters in the books, and they're all really gentle, lovely characters.
But I think that, people can be decent. It's reminded me that, that being a kind, decent person doesn't necessarily have to be out of fashion, that someone else is writing about that. So I think that's what I really like about them.
And this land looked very much like, if you look off in the distance here, it was just bush.
Yep. The #1 ladies' detective agency is now being made into a film. The director is award-winning Anthony Minghella. To shoot it, a village has been erected at the foot of Kali Hill. Today, Alexander McCall Smith is visiting the set for the first time.
You look at this is all wood. One of the things that Alexander McCall Smith does so fabulously is that he takes a detail, and it is the one detail that conjures up the scene or the chapter or the country, or the mood of who a character is. He takes that one detail. In film, we have many, many details on screen. Very first sentence in your first book is?
Mara Motsoe had a detective agency in Africa at the foot of Kali Hill.
And that didn't exist, of course. And what we were able to do is take what was in your imagination and to make it come to life.
Yeah.
And basically,
there
here
we are.
is
Amazing,
Kali Hill.
amazing.
This may be the largest film production ever in Botswana, but there's little risk that the fame will go to Mara Motsoe's head, promises Alexander McCall Smith.
What do you think about Mara Motsoe becoming a film star?
Well, I think that Mara Motsoe will handle it. You see, she's a very wise woman, and perhaps other women, when they discover that they've become the subject of a film, would have perhaps ideas. But Mara Motsoe is a very wise woman. She just accepts it. Gaborone had grown, changing out of all recognition. When she first went there as a little girl, there had been little more than several rings of houses about the mall and the few government offices. Much bigger than Machudi, of course, and so much more impressive, with the government buildings and Seretse Khama's house. But it was still quite small, really, if you'd seen photographs of Johannesburg or even Bulawayo, and no factories, none at all.
Botswana is an African success story. In just 40 years, it has risen from poverty to be classed as a middle-income country. With its long history of democracy and sound economic management, it is free from the political conflict and racism that afflicts so much of the continent.
It has, of all the sub-Saharan African states, the most peaceful post-independence record. That really is remarkable. Now, obviously, it's been fortunate in some respects, in that the discovery of diamonds greatly helped the national coffers. And I think that maybe the story would have been different had there been economic problems.
It has an area equal to that of France, with a population of only 1.8 million. It is almost entirely covered by the Kalahari Desert. Botswana has never been a colony. It was a British protectorate called Bechuanaland, until the British granted it independence on the 30th of December 1966.
Mara Motsoe had been an 8-year-old girl then, a pupil at the government school at Machudi, and only vaguely aware that anything special was happening and that something which people called freedom had arrived. But she'd not felt any difference the next day, and she wondered what this freedom meant. Now she knew, of course, and her heart filled with pride when she thought of all they had achieved in 30 short years. The great swathe of territory, which the British really had not known what to do with, had prospered to become the best-run state in Africa by far. Well could people shout, "Pula, Pula, Pula," reign with pride.
Every village has its own khotla, a council at which everyone is entitled to voice their opinion, and minor legal cases can be heard. It's upon this old democratic tradition that Botswana's modern society is built. Sir Ketumile Mazire, one of Botswana's pre-independence activists, explains.
We were wise enough at the beginning to have had a democratic attitude where we let everybody talk as he feels and thinks, and at the end of a khotla meeting, a consensus is built, and the chief sums up that consensus.
One of the key figures in the building of the modern Botswana was the country's first president, Sir Seretse Khama.
He was a Democrat by nature, although born of chiefly origin. He shared his views with the other people. He used his ministers as colleagues. I remember one of his expressions was a good general is one who has good lieutenants.
Sir Seretse Khama had to go into exile as he'd married a British wife, Ruth, a white woman. But with time, the once controversial marriage came to be seen in a different light.
Well, I think the marriage between the Khamas was one which demonstrated the possibilities of peaceful coexistence and demonstrated the possibilities of rising above the limitations of race and group.
The climate of Botswana is very dry and hot. It's not suited to arable farming, but it's very good for cattle farming. The country's most important source of income is diamonds, which were only discovered 2 years after independence. The mining is carried out jointly by De Beers, a private company, and the state. It's what finances so much of Botswana's welfare development.
What we do is we come up with plans, and from those plans we then submit to the government. Then they calculate the revenue that will come from the diamonds. Then the budget of the country is based on that. For the developments like the roads, the hospitals, all the requirements of the country come from this mine.
I think De Beers' greatest achievement is the discovery of the diamonds themselves. Let me give you an example. It is estimated that of all the kimberlites in the world, the kimberlite is the rock that carries the diamond, only 2% carry enough diamonds to make it economical. As it happens, 2 of the largest kimberlites were discovered by De Beers in Botswana about 36 years ago. From that moment on, the country never looked back. I think that is probably the single most important thing, is the discovery of the deposits themselves.
Today, Botswana is the world's largest diamond producer. The mining follows strict security procedures to ensure nothing ends up in the wrong hands.
There are no blood diamonds in Botswana. Botswana diamonds are produced under strict conditions, and they're clean and open. Everybody knows where they come from, and everybody knows where the revenues go. And it's those diamond revenues which actually pay for the hospitals, pay for the anti-HIV drugs, which keep people alive, pay for education.
In Gaborone, they are sorted. Soon it will be possible to cut and polish them here too. The government knows the diamond mines won't last forever, so they are striving to diversify the economy.
We say we are open for business. Yeah. We may be a small economy, but we run an open society and an open economy. We believe in international trade. We believe in international free competition. We believe in foreign investment.
New office blocks and financial institutions are going up all over Gaborone, the capital. A growing middle class is creating a customer basis for the new shopping centres around the country. No wonder the country is sometimes called the Switzerland of Africa.
Botswana, in a sense of development, is still a developing nation. Donor nations like to call us a middle-income country, but in terms of entrepreneurial skills and things like that, we're still very much in our infancy. And so there's great potential for people with good ideas to come and share them with local aspirant entrepreneurs and enjoy fairly high rates of economic growth, typical of a well-managed emerging market.
Parallel to this urban society, the traditional way of life is the norm outside the towns. In Botswana, many people still don't have access to electricity. One of them is mother of three, Francina Sinos.
Since I'm living in a house where there's no electricity, life is so difficult because we are living in a developed world whereby we are using most of things are electrified, like gas, like stove, cell phones, radios, television, whereby it can keep even children at home. But if you don't have electricity, they will just go, children they will go to other places where they have electricity so that they can entertain themselves to watch television.
A major power project was recently started. 100 villages all over the country are to get electricity, a permanent change in the lives of the villagers.
The people of Botswana are blessed with the fact that they have a very much enlightened government that appreciate the fact that access to electricity is a prerequisite for development. And the government of Botswana have also realized that all of the country must be part of the development. So that is the reason why they have decided that the villages to be included in this project are found all over the country, not only in few selected areas.
All villages in Botswana are electrified. All of us, we can be happy or rejoice. We can think that we are in heaven. The fear of darkness will be gone and we'll be free. We'll have that freedom to walk, to visit one another. Even when we are sick, you can go to the hospital.
People want water in their houses, they want electricity in their houses, and so on. They want transport. They want all the benefits of the modern world, and quite understandably. I suppose where one might find something which one wouldn't be so enthusiastic about was when you see some of the shallowness of the modern world being imported, lock, stock and barrel. You realize that the values or lack of values which are involved with that importation are not necessarily very nice.
Some stories in the books are completely fictitious, while others contain references to real places and people. For example, Mokolodi, a game reserve that is visited by many school children.
The children come out for a 2-week camp, we call it. They stay here in our dormitories, and then they go through a syllabus of lessons which we give them on aquatic studies, and then on the environment, and then on the importance of wildlife.
The park warden at Mokolodi Game Reserve, Neil Whitson, is one of the characters in the books. He has to intervene when a python gets into Ma Ramotswe's office and her apprentices can't get it out.
The younger apprentice now returned with a longish stick from the jacaranda tree which grew at the edge of the garage plot. Neil took this from him and edged his way slowly into the office. The snake watched him, part of its body raised, the hood half up. With a sudden movement, Neil flipped the stick over the snake's back and pressed the neck of the snake down against the floor. Then, leaning forward, he gripped the writhing cobra behind the head and picked it up. The lashing tail, searching for purchase, was soon firmly held in his other hand. There, he said, "Now, Charlie, a sack is what we need. You must have a sack somewhere." Well, you were pretty brave there, Neil. I mean, obviously you're not frightened of snakes.
No, in fact, it has to be part of our job. You know, being out here in the bush and on the nature reserve, snakes sometimes come to people's houses. In fact, lucky we actually did that yesterday. We've caught a snake in a lady's house. That was coming exactly the same situation as in the book. And in fact, we're going to release it today. Maybe you'd like to come out and help us release him.
I'd be very happy to do that.
Yeah. In fact, we'll see how it's done in the book. Will be the same. How we're going to have to release it. It's part of the normal day-to-day job.
Let's go and do it.
Let's go and do it. We'll see. You can strike now. So, Sandy, what I need you to do is maybe grab this end of the tail.
Okay.
Just mind that he doesn't mess on you. Yep. And then pull it straight for me. Pull it straight back. So he's quite a handsome fella.
I wonder when he last had a meal, Neil.
Yeah, he doesn't look in bad condition.
We'll let go first, I think, shall we?
Yeah.
Neil, okay. Okay.
Now he's going back to his life.
I was very pleased when he said that he had a rather impressive-looking python who needed to be released. And so I played a very small part in that. I was at the safe end of the python. He was at the dangerous end.
Have you picked up some new things today?
I have. On this visit today, I've had one or two ideas in my conversation with Neil. Neil is very good at coming up with suggestions about what might happen, and he came up with some interesting ideas about what the apprentices might do if they came to work for him for a spell. Of course, all sorts of things would go wrong. So Maramotswe Matkoni will have to sort that out. This is the children's home, which is the inspiration for the orphan farm in the books. I knew the matron here, and indeed Derek James, who runs this place, and I used to come out and see them from time to time. And the matron who worked here was the inspiration for Ma Potokwane in the books. She was a remarkable woman who would do anything to benefit the children under her care.
I really felt sorry for the orphans. SOS doesn't get orphans from AIDS only. The orphans are from road traffic accidents. They are from AIDS. Some of them were from labor conducted in homes. The mother dying because of labor. McCall Smith was using my character because I like children. Throughout my life, I've worked with children. I'm a nurse by profession.
The thing which impresses me about this place, which obviously at the moment, for obvious reasons, has quite a lot of pressure on its resources with more and more children requiring a home. The thing that impresses me is that all of these children are given unconditional love here. They have a wonderful atmosphere in this place.
The AIDS pandemic has significantly contributed to the increasing numbers of orphans. The United Nations estimates that every fifth child in Botswana will be an orphan by the year 2010.
We see more and more orphans in Botswana. The numbers are rising. Definitely, much as government is doing something, but we see the numbers rising.
It was particularly hard for women now when there were so many children left without parents because of this cruel sickness. These children had to be looked after by somebody, and this task usually fell to the grandmothers. But in many cases, the grandmothers were finding it difficult to cope because there were simply so many children coming to them. Maramotswe had met one woman who had been looking after 12 grandchildren, all orphaned. And there was this woman at 75, at a time when a person should be allowed to sit in the sun and look up at the sky, cooking and washing and scraping around for food for the hungry mouths of all those children. And if that grandmother should become late, she thought, what then? In most sub-Saharan African countries, the extended family system has traditionally been method of social support for people. The problem is that that's broken now because AIDS has caused so many deaths in many of these countries that people just couldn't cope with the spare children who were left over. It's really extremely sad.
Coco, hello. Can I come into your house? Is it okay?
In a continent which has so many difficulties in it and where there are so many people who have a bit of a battle, to see people such as the people who work out at that children's village doing something about it and trying to make the world a better place is most encouraging. I admire them greatly.
An estimated 17% of Botswana's population has HIV or AIDS. One of the many victim support groups is in Khabane village. The initiator is Gurle Motibedi, who discovered she was HIV positive when she was pregnant with her 5th child.
It came into my mind, how many people are suffering? Maybe I'll blame somebody that he's not helping me. Maybe they are going through the same thing that I'm going through. And it's painful. And we lost everything, everything. That's how I came out public and thinking that maybe if somebody could cry out and say, help, somebody will hear. Somebody somewhere will hear that this person is asking for help. And really the government of Botswana did hear.
Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus.
The government of Botswana has declared the pandemic a national disaster. As a result of cooperation between the government and private donors, all citizens have free access to HIV testing, condoms, advice, antiretroviral drugs, and counseling.
Since 2000, HAP has put in place a number of initiatives to help deal with increasing HIV prevention activities, to support the national treatment program, to work on community mobilization, and also to help ensure that there is increased capacity to deal with HIV across the entire government sector in Botswana.
Due to the effective antiretroviral drugs, an HIV/AIDS diagnosis is no longer a death sentence, so more and more people dare get themselves tested and seek treatment.
It's terribly important that these drugs should be made freely available to people who need to take them. Extremely important, because that's the only way in which you're going to prevent people from dying a premature, grossly premature death in some cases. And people can't afford to buy them themselves. I think one would hope that rich countries would continue to give as much money as possible to help in this terrible public health emergency.
Before the ARVs, people were dying, and the fear of death, it was amongst everybody. And people, they had a lot of fear, thinking that maybe talking to somebody with HIV, you'll contact it and your penalty is death. So people are taking medication and they're becoming to be healthy again. Like myself, I don't fear anything. I feel fresh every day. And I don't even think about HIV. I think of my life.
I think people have definitely understood the importance of the epidemic and its impact on their lives, because they see it and they felt it every day. I mean, if you were here 5-10 years ago, many people were dying of HIV/AIDS, and many young people. And because people have now got onto the treatment program, that picture has changed completely. So I think there is commitment in the population to actually respond in positive ways to the epidemic. There are still many challenges, of course, to address in relation to people's knowledge, in relation to the kind of behavior change that is necessary, and perhaps changing certain patterns of behavior. But all of that is going to take time and effort. But I think there has been a positive response from the population on the whole.
One positive sign is the decrease in numbers of newly infected people, particularly in lower age groups.
HIV prevalence, a general prevalence of 17.1% in any one country, is very high. I really look forward to a day when I'll be able to say to people, our HIV prevalence is 1%, if not 0. So it simply means that now we are saying maybe this path is the right path because we're seeing the results, but let's intensify and make sure that those results are achieved a lot more rapidly than we are doing right now.
You don't directly write out the name of the disease, HIV or AIDS, in your books, even when you go into the subject. Why is that?
I thought very carefully about how I should deal with the fact that there is a serious, dreadful disease stalking throughout these African countries, causing terrible tragedy at every level. And this country has been badly affected by that. AIDS has had a major impact on Botswana, as it has in other countries in the region. So I'm not avoiding it, but I did feel that if I spent too much time on it or gave it centre stage, it could change the feeling of the books, it could change the nature of the books from being celebrations to being tragedies. And the difficulty with that is that virtually every novelist who writes about Africa writes a tragedy. And I think that we have to break away from that.
Botswana used not to be known. When I first went to school in America in the 70s, I got there and I would say Botswana and people would say, where is that? You know, and I know when you said it's close to South Africa, then they would say that lady from South Africa, because they just didn't know where Botswana was. Then later Botswana got to be known because of HIV. I mean, you don't want to be known because of that, you know. So, but that's how you got, you know, if you said you are from Botswana, it's to be like, yeah, I've heard of it in connection with AIDS. Is that where you are all dying? And, you know, we're not even like dying like flies, but that's how you got to be known. Now, at least now, you meet somebody and immediately you say Botswana, is like, ah, the #1 detective. That's the place. How is she? Is she there? I mean, people think she's alive here in Botswana. And sometimes with me, I say to them, yeah, she's alive, meaning me. Say, yeah, no, she's alive, she's fine. She's right there.
Botswana has one of Africa's last unspoilt wilderness areas. The unique Okavango Delta is here, the world's largest inland delta. The water flows in from the Angolan highlands and is so pure that it is perfectly drinkable. Wildlife roams free. There's an abundance of lions, leopards, elephants, zebras, giraffes, and rare bird species. Many view the region as the Garden of Eden.
Tourism is a double-edged sword. In some respects, it brings obvious benefits to the communities where tourists go. But in other respects, it's very socially destructive and environmentally destructive. And I think we can all think of areas which have been completely ruined by mass tourism. Botswana doesn't want that to happen, and so they have concentrated on what they call high-end tourism. In other words, rather expensive tourism. It's expensive for people to come to places like this.
Previously, trophy hunting attracted the rich and famous. But today, photographic safaris and eco-tourism are more common, such as here at Little Vumbura.
We have, in our operations, very advanced waste systems, both liquid and solid, very advanced energy generation and conservation systems, And these things cost money. Nobody must kid themselves that at distances in remote and extremely remote places like this, very difficult logistics to get them in, requires a lot of money. Of course, and effort and attention. But if you're going to run something out here, I believe the higher class it is, the more money you can spend on impact. Simple as that.
Most of the safari camps are owned and run by foreign companies. Recently, more and more Botswana citizens have been taking an interest in the growing tourism industry.
The government is encouraging the Botswana people to go forward and trying to be in the society also. That we young ones, as like I remember when I was in Japan, the president, when we shake the hands, he's saying that he's very happy to see a young lady like me to own a lodge in Botswana. Mapula Lodge, good day.
Tiny Hansen feels that Ma Ramotswe's being self-employed is inspiring to herself and to the next generation in Botswana.
Maramoto, I would say that I wouldn't mind to sit even myself to talk to her, say that how wonderful you show every single young ladies to go forward, even those one behind me. So I admire her.
We have to look, listen and react.
Most of the employees at Mapula Lodge come from the neighbouring villages. Many of these people are San, so-called Bushmen or Basawa. The San are considered to be the original inhabitants of Botswana. The San lived as hunters and gatherers for tens of thousands of years, until the Botswana government encouraged them to settle in the 1980s.
We used to go out for some periods to collect berries, to hunt out there, and just bring back the biltong back home. That could be an interval of maybe spending a whole month out into the bush. And then it was such a hard life for us. Then the government decided, just group yourself somewhere where I can reach you and provide you with some of the facilities. This was 15 years ago.
After local and international protests, the High Court ruled that the San people had the right to return to their traditional nomadic lifestyle, though not all of them want to.
To me, it doesn't sound like it has actually damaged our culture, but to my elder parents, that is what they exactly feel, because they have lived this kind of life for a long time ago, since Stone Age, I should say. So it's not so easy for this kind of life to wipe away from their memories. So it will take them time to get adapted to this new modern life. But to me, as a youth, I've been to school. I also want to live the way this changing world demands me to live. So to me, the changes are just good, but they put a little bit pressure on me because I have to cope with the situation, which is not very simple.
You must understand, said Ma Potkwani, that although it's easy for us to criticize the ways of the Basawa, we should think very carefully before we do that. When you look at the life they lead, out there in the Kalahari, with no cattle of their own and no houses to live in, when you think about that, and wonder how long you and I and other Botswana would be able to live like that, then you realize that these Bushmen are remarkable people.
One way to prevent the San culture and its click language from disappearing is through art.
Nes qoys kacbas khasa khato kana I khabasar kama kan khasar qoysar sita ma kama kan khaya ta ko sita khasar kama kan khatolila kan ka sita ko sita dingo di khun khatina khatuni di khun khatin qaqay akukuru I sita di qoyan kama kan khaya Kabakuri di koyan khatina ta yen tin kha itsolela kana kabakuri di koyan khakan khoskole ko kaskolen ko khatasi I khabe ko khatasi kabise akha in masaro tadingwa kasite I ama kiro kha koyan I kahba khatin rin khatin in kahba kuri ko khakira kama tkhotria abo khurdun kha kahba skoisko hanasa khan khakoa I kahba koisai ko kuru kai ko kabise khan khate in suaus tikhatsengi makrafta mahana ima kamatani kiji huji teyana kama
Then we have something we call desert greenhouses. It's a very strong greenhouse built from this type of walls.
Yes.
And then we throw bow greenhouses over there.
Today the tour has reached Sanitas, a plant nursery and tea garden. For over 50 years the founder, Gus Nielsen, has sought new ways of making the desert fertile.
But if you look at these trees, you can see how close we have planted them.
Yes, yes.
It's a real experiment, but they're producing so fantastic.
Yes, and
there.
it's worked, has it?
But they are standing.
Yes.
They are standing on so much sand.
Yes, yes.
River sand. The root system is only
that deep,
15 to 20 centimeters.
Isn't that amazing?
So trees don't need much space.
Yeah.
And then we grow grass on the
Here
top there.
is all this growth, and this remarkable man, extraordinary man, had this vision of how this country could be made green. And in this little bit of Botswana, he's done it. He is a hero. Maramaswi would certainly be very interested in coming here. Indeed, over lunch, I was discussing with Gus's wife how we might bring Maramaswi here in the next book. She's got quite a lot to do in Volume 9, but we always have the room for another little mystery. And I was being told that they lost quite a bit of fruit here recently, and they were wondering where this fruit was going, and there was a very interesting resolution of that problem. So Maramaswi will probably work on that case. The climb did not take long, and soon they were standing on the edge of a large expanse of elevated rock, looking down on Machudi, on the church with its red tin roof, on the tiny hospital where the heroic daily battle was fought with small resources against such powerful enemies, and out over the plains to the south. The river was flowing now, broadly and lazily, winding its way past clumps of trees and bush and the clusters of compounds that made up the straggling village. A small herd of cattle was being driven along a path near the river, and from where they stood the cattle looked tiny, like toys. But the wind was in their direction, and the sound of their bells could be made out, a distant, soft sound, so redolent of the Botswana bushland, so much the sound of home. Hello, hello, good to see you. How are you? Very well, very well. Nice to see you, Elena.
At the village museum in Mochudi, there are exhibits of everyday life in former times. Alexander McCall Smith often returns here to seek inspiration for his books.
It's very important for me to come here because I find that there's a particular pace of life that I try to convey in the novels. The novels don't move at breakneck speed. There's a slowness, there's a sense of relaxation, there's a very particular atmosphere, and it's important that I should come back, I think, every so often. Indeed, I come every year, and remind myself of what it's like to be in this country. It's wonderful how up here you hear the sounds of the village down below, and particularly if we hear cattle bells. I don't know whether you've heard cattle bells. Yes, I can hear cattle bells. A lovely sound.
It's no coincidence that the introduction to the No. 1 Ladies Detective Agency reminds readers of the Danish author Karen Blixen's classic memoir, Out of Africa.
Karen Blixen's wonderful book, Out of Africa, starts with the resounding line, "I had a farm in Africa at the foot of the Ngong Hills." What a resonant, striking first line that is. And I found it very impressive, so impressive that I started the #1 Ladies Detective Agency with a similar line when I wrote, Mara Motswe had a detective agency at the foot of Kali Hill. It's my little bow in the direction of Karen Blixen. She was so affected by Africa. And I think African countries can do that. They can change people, affect them in a very, very profound way. And I would hope that when people read the Mara Motswe books, even if they don't know Africa, I would hope that they would be affected in some way by that spirit of Africa. I think the old Botswana values which Mara Motswe talks about really are the values that she saw in her father, the late Obed Ramotswe. And I think they were values of respect and courtesy principally, but with a certain communitarian feel, that you weren't selfish. I think those are important aspects of these old Botswana values.
Many readers have wondered how a man from Scotland can write so knowledgeably about the thoughts of a woman from Botswana. How much of it is based on the author's own personality and views?
No, I'm not Mara Motswe. Some people have said that I'm Mara Motswe, but I'm not Mara Motswe, definitely not. Mara Motswe is aspirational as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to be more like Mara Motswe, or indeed Mr. J.L.B. Matakoni, but I'm not. I mean, there are too many flaws in my character to be Mara Motswe. I think of her when I'm about to say something uncharitable. I think, what would Mara Motswe think of that? And usually it stops me.
After a few weeks travelling, Alexander McCall Smith has collected enough material for the 9th book, in a total of 11, in his series about Botswana's first female detective, her cases and her love for her home country. He also now knows how he is to start it.
I think we'll start with her going out into her garden. The books often start in that way. And she's got her cup of tea, and she's thinking about the importance of the first cup of tea and how the first cup of tea of the day differs from the second, third, fourth and fifth cup of tea. It pleased her to see these visitors who came to her country and seemed to fall head over heels in love with it. And why should they not do this? The world was a sad enough place, and it needed a few points of light, a few places in which people could find comfort. And if Botswana was one of these, then she was proud of that. If only more people knew, thought Mara Motswe. If only more people knew that there was more to Africa than all the problems they saw. They could love us too, as we love them.